Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do the problem of the week for February 8th, 2021 solution. So let's go through number one. Okay, here we go. Number one, we have tangent theta is negative 4/3, and we are told that theta is in between 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi, which means it is in the fourth quadrant. Okay, and then we are asked to find tangent of 2 theta. Okay, so if I look on my formula sheet or in my notes, I find that the formula for tangent of 2 theta looks like this. And it doesn't require me to find anything else. Like I don't need a sine, I don't need a cosine. So I can just go ahead and plug in the information that I have. So we're going to go 2, then tangent theta, 4/3, and then 1 minus negative 4/3 squared. Now after that, it becomes a massive simplification problem. So what we want to do is we want to go simplify our numerator, simplify our denominator, and then turn this into the big division problem that it is. So 2 times a negative 4/3 is negative 8 over 3. All right, now let's work on the bottom. 1 minus negative 4/3 squared. We square the numerator and the denominator, so we get 16 over 9, positive. Now we have that minus sign on the outside, so that's going to turn it back negative. Now we need to continue simplifying the denominator. So we need a common denominator for that one, which would be 9 over 9. And again, I'm showing you this with absolutely no calculator. Okay? Okay, so we have 9 minus 16, which is a negative 7 over a 9. Remember, when you add or subtract fractions, your denominator doesn't change. Okay, so this is a big old division problem is what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to invert and multiply. So negative 8/3 times 9 over 7 negative. Then we can start reducing, and then remember a negative times a negative is a positive. So we have 8 times 3 all over 7, or 24 over 7 as our final answer. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next one. Okay, the next one is very, very similar, except we are going to have to find something using that triangle information. Okay, so this is problem 2, and we are told that tangent of theta is negative 1/4, and we want to be 3 pi over 2 theta 2 pi, so that means we are in the fourth quadrant. Okay, so knowing where you live is very important to determine the sign of your trig ratios, because we're going to need sine or cosine here because we are looking for cosine of 2 theta. Okay, so cosine of 2 theta actually has like 3 formulas. It has cosine squared x minus sine squared x. So we can use this one. We could use this one. Okay. Or we can use this one. Okay. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually going to go ahead and use this one because I know that if I use that one, I'm not going to have to deal with any common denominators. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw myself a nice little XY. Okay. All right. And I'm going to draw a triangle in quadrant 4. Okay. The hypotenuse, remember, extends from the origin. And then the 90-degree angle is formed with the x-axis. Always the x-axis, never the y. So if I know that this is theta and it lands in quadrant 4, this is my reference angle. I also know that tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent. Now, since the opposite side is going downward, that is where the negative lives. So -1. So now I'm going to find the hypotenuse so I can find sine and cosine. To find the hypotenuse, I'm going to use my old friend, Pythagoras. Okay, so that's my C, or my hypotenuse. So I'm going to go -1 squared plus 4 squared is equal to C squared. 1 plus 16, C squared. 17 is equal to C squared. And then the square root of 17. That's my C. Okay, what that means is it means that sine of theta is opposite, which is -1, over the hypotenuse, which is radical 17. Cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse, or 4 divided by the square root of 17. Okay, now using the formula that I boxed, what we're going to do is we're just going to plug it in. So 4 square root 17 squared minus a -1 over square root 17 squared. Okay, now I didn't rationalize my denominator because I'm squaring my fractions, so that radical is going to resolve. So I get 16 over 17, 1 over 17. And look, I have common denominators, so 15 over 17 is my final answer. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and do our half angle formulas. And our last one. We'll just do the whole quiz in one video. Okay? All right, here we go. Okay. Problem 3. We are asked to find tangent of 15 degrees, and it says to use a half angle formula. So what do I divide by 2 to get 15? Well, I divide 30. Okay, so your theta or your x is 30. So we look at the half angle formulas. Now there are actually 2 for tangent. So I'm going to use this one. So tangent theta divided by 2, 1 minus cosine theta divided by sine theta. And then you have another one, which is sine theta divided by 1 plus cosine theta. Okay, I like the first one, so I'm going to use that one. And again, it's personal preference. So I have to find 1 minus cosine of 30 degrees divided by sine of 30 degrees. Okay, so I either look on my unit circle, I have it memorized, I type it into a calculator. Cosine of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 over 2. And then sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify the top. We're going to find a common denominator for that one, which is 2 over 2 minus radical 3 over 2. There's a lot of 2's. Okay, you can get lost. Okay, so since we have a common denominator, what we're going to do is this. So again, our denominators don't change. Okay, stay the same. That's a big old division problem now. So what we're going to do is we're going to invert and multiply. And then very nicely, you'll notice that this happens. Okay, cool. All right, let's do number 4. Oh, final answer, sorry. 2 minus radical 3. All right, let's take a look at number 4. Okay, number 4 says sine of 157.5 degrees. So we need to figure out what did we divide to get 157.5, and that would be sine of 315. Okay, so again, we're going to look at our formula sheet. Again, okay, so I notice that sine of x divided by 2 is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine x all over 2. Okay, so first you have to decide what sine you are. So sine 157 degrees is in quadrant 2. Okay, so what sine is your sine ratio in quadrant 2? That would be positive. So when we work out our answer, it's going to be a positive square root. So it's going to be 1 minus cosine 315 all over 2. Okay, again, we have a lot of simplification to do. All right, so 1 minus, okay, cosine of 315 is positive radical 2 over 2. All under that big old square root. Okay, we have to find our common denominator. Change that 1 to a 2 over 2. Like that. And again, we have that big old square root. So common denominator, so it looks like this. Okay, now when you invert and multiply, you do have to be very careful because this is 2 over 1. So when you invert it, it becomes a 1/2. And again, everything is inside that radical. Oops. So we have 2 minus radical 2 over 2 times a 1/2, all inside that radical. So again, 2 minus rad 2 all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, can't take the square root of the numerator, so that stays inside. Looks a little ugly. Okay, and then we have the square root of 4, which is 2. Okay, and that would be your final answer. Okay, so again, a lot of simplifying, a lot of fractions. Okay, all right, last one. let's see, this is number 5. Sorry to make you a little dizzy there. Okay, I want to solve negative cosine x equals sine 2x for 0 x less than 2 pi. Okie dokie. All right, so we're going to look at sine 2x. What are we going to replace that with? We don't want the argument of the trig function, which is the 2x, that's the argument, okay, to be different. We don't want those to be different. Right now we have a 1x as an argument on the left and a 2x as the argument on the right. We would like those to be the same if we can get it that way. Again, this is solving with no calculator. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on my formulas and I'm going to replace the sine 2x using a double angle formula. Like that. Okay, so now I got no like terms. So I'm just going to drag everything to one side, see if I can factor. So I'm going to add a cosine to both sides. Okay, now if I look really closely, you'll notice that both of them have cosines, so that means I can factor out a cosine. Now when you're factoring, you're essentially dividing, okay? When you're factoring, what you're doing is you're telling me what you're dividing by. You say, oh, Mrs. Harris, I am dividing by cosine of x, okay? And then you tell me the quotient. So if I divide the first 2 sine x cosine x by cosine, what's the quotient? Well, the quotient would be 2 sine x. Well, what do you get when you divide cosine by cosine? Well, you get a 1. Okay? That's factored. Now I can set each factor equal to 0. So I have cosine x equals 0, and then 2 sine x plus 1 equals 0. Okay. So this one is solved. Cosine x is equal to 0. This one, we're going to subtract the 1, divide by 2, and we're going to get sine x is equal to 1/2. Okay? So these are essentially asking us 2 questions because we're solving from 0 to 2 pi. So first question is, what angle has a cosine ratio of 0? So you look on your unit circle, or you have it memorized, whatever, okay, and you say, well, cosine gives me a 0 at x equals pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, okay? Be careful with the calculator on this one because it won't give you every single answer, okay? The second question we need to answer is what angle or angles have a sine ratio of -1/2. So we look on our unit circle, or we have it memorized, and -1/2, the sine ratio would be -7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. Now if you type that into a calculator, your calculator is going to tell you -pi over 6. Okay? Well, -pi over 6 is the coterminal angle 11 pi over 6. Okay, so be very careful with the calculator because you want your answers to live between 0 and 2 pi. Okay? I hope that clarified the quiz for you, and I hope you found this helpful.